Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the channel. I'm Brian Lusk. Let's go ahead and get started here. As you can tell, I am having some technical difficulties today. And for an old IT guy, it's pretty hilarious when I have technical difficulties because now I'm down to a single device here with my cell phone as my what I'm monitoring comments with. It's really just kind of down to keeping things as minimal as possible today. But we've had a whole bunch of stuff happen over the last 36 hours in Ukraine and Russia. Much of it is absolutely crazy stuff going on. The volunteer Russian legions have marched into parts of Kursk and Belgorod. There's been a slew of drone attacks, especially on refineries across the western part of Russia. There's been all kinds of just insane things going on. We've got an IL-76 that's gone down on top of that as well in suspicious circumstances, we'll put it that way, but it was not near the front lines. And there's some conversation on exactly what happened there. So we've got a lot to cover. Let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to start with the threat assessment by the U.S. Security Administration. I don't remember if it's CIA or I think it is CIA in this case. Now, there's a lot of things going on here, in particular in this threat assessment, and I'm kind of briefly kind of go over all of it. There's a lot here, and I want to kind of just touch on it. By the way, with all the technical stuff, it does mean that today you're going to be getting a lot less polished than normal. Not that that's unusual in that regard, but you're going to see a lot more of the raw research that I put together today rather than having it necessarily neatly ordered. So bear with me as I get through things. Tons of stuff here. We'll start with the big top of the line here. The Congress asked, basically, if the Congress asked, look, if Ukraine promised not to join NATO, would this whole thing be over? And the answer was no, it would not be over. This is the U.S. Intelligence Worldwide Assessment with Congress asking questions here. One of the takeaways was, I'm particularly concerned that Russia's Vladimir Putin is exploring opportunities because he has already done so in part and because he has a lot to gain, and also warning of China and Iran. The opening statement is pretty straightforward stuff here, talking about Chinese leaders looking at this whole situation. People who want to harm America have entered our country illegally and are here. So they're calling that into attention for a little bit here. There's also, they're looking at a high terrorist threat level right now. And a bunch of foreign terrorist organizations are looking at opportunities that they are seeing right now in the U.S. to take on the U.S. directly. It really looks like overall the U.S. weakness on the world stage has led to a lot of bad actors looking at opportunities and saying, what I used to think wasn't a possibility now very much is. Let's go ahead and keep on going. There's stuff here about Ukraine. What Vladimir Putin seeks, what caused him to launch his brutal and unprovoked invasion about 2 years ago, was his fixation on subjugating Ukraine and controlling its choices. This is much broader than just the issue of NATO. Putin, I've heard him say this many times in the past, believes that Ukraine isn't a real country. What Ukrainians have done is demonstrate that real countries fight back. So that's kind of the overall thoughts on this so far. And then they were asked, do Ukrainians want to be part of Russia? I think the vast majority of Ukrainians, especially reinforced by Putin's brutal invasion, want to be part of a sovereign, independent Ukraine. Talks about war crimes, talks about Putin wanting to bring Russia back to its former glory, and overall, just all of the aspects that indicate that Vladimir Putin's intentions to invade Ukraine go far beyond just their stated goals of denazification and demilitarization. Especially since a lot of the, well, not going to address that one here. So overall, we're looking at a situation where Vladimir Putin sees opportunity and is going straight forward at it, and realizes that if he's going to have his previous USSR back, he's going to have to be aggressive as things go on. That's what we're looking at for the intelligence assessment. And overall, it seems pretty accurate to what I know. I'm not giving an analysis on all of it, just saying that they know far more than I do, and overall, this matches what I'm seeing in other sources. Let's move on to the Institute for the Study of Wars assessment as well. This is from yesterday. Transfers of North Korean weapons to Russia by sea have apparently resumed after a pause since mid-February. That might be an issue with getting the number of ships or getting their manufacturing together. No real reason behind it. But once again, North Korea is continuing to provide armaments to Russia. Russian forces are increasingly using grenades equipped with chemical substances. Mostly they're using chloropicrin, an irritant that it can be lethal if you don't get treatment, but overall it's mainly an irritant to soft tissues, from my understanding. And Moldova is basically summoning the Russian ambassador to say, hey, look, we're not doing anything to provoke you. Knock it off. You guys are trying to create a provocation over here. So this is they're saying, Russia's saying that Russia is saying that no, we're only using the authorized polling station in the capital, and yet they're actually operating several polling stations in Transnistria. So that's the long story short on that. Then there's something, I think I've got more on this later, so I'll touch on it right now. Russia, China, and Iran are going to hold a joint maritime security naval exercise in March, basically March 11th through 15th. It's already going on. That indicates who the people working together are. These are the bad actors on the world stage right now. They're all getting together to work together on making the world into their image. Now let's go ahead and move on. By the way, I'm going to have just bop the volume up on my cell phone just to make sure everything's good. Now let's go ahead and move on. By the way, I'm going to. Okay, sounds good. So you might get a little bit of a repeat there for a few moments. I just want to make sure my audio is still good. So moving on to this IL-76 situation, and there's a lot of stuff here. So I'm going to try and quickly get through the most of it. There's video of this airplane going down all over the place. I'm not going to play it. That's not much to see as far as we go. You can see the engine on fire. You can see the airplane go down behind a row of trees, and an explosion following that type of thing. So this is an IL-76 military transport that was coming into an airfield near Ivanovo. Now, Ivanovo is significant because that's where a whole bunch of A-50s are parked. And as we know, the A-50s are the AWACS type aircraft that Russia's been using, well, and stopped using in recent times after losing a couple to Ukraine. The crash, there's still lots of theorizing and speculating going on right now. Like I said, we do see the engines on fire. Russian sources have said there was a bird that was sucked into the engine. Absolutely a possibility. But alone by itself, this would not cause a 4-engine aircraft to go into crash. So further damage must have also occurred in order to cause this to happen. Or, and this is always a possibility, the pilots must have mishandled the emergency so badly that they lost control of the airplane. So only two real possibilities there. Either more damage than just an engine fire, or the pilots mishandled the aircraft really badly. Now, they say that the plane this happened during takeoff. I've seen others say it was during landing. I don't have good information on that so far. So just keep those circumstances in mind there. It's pretty crazy. It had 8 crew members and 7 passengers. and all of them perished in the crash, according to the latest reports. They do call it a technical malfunction with one of the engines coming off. And if it does come off like that, it could have easily spun debris into the aircraft itself, damaging other systems such as hydraulics or control lines or electronics that for the aircraft. We don't know the details on that part of it, but we do know that an engine detached. It was on fire, and the end result was the aircraft going down. They do talk about this being a big loss for the armed forces of Russia. Bear with me as I kind of just move forward and get through here. This source actually states there were 12 people on board, but I've seen others say 15. This is one of the that Severny Airport in Ivanovo is one of the bases for their A-50 deployments. So it could be they were related, and if it was on takeoff or landing, either way, it's probably crew related to that aircraft. They also say that some of the people on board were officers and rare specialists, which again would fit the profile once more. Here's the crash site itself where the plane went down. The guy in the audio says it smells terrible, according to journalist Jason J. Smart. And this source, Anton Herashchenko, states that 16 people were on board, not 15. So the main version of the crash, according to Russian public channels, is a technical malfunction. I've seen others say there was a bird. Now, as far as the sources that say it was a drone, that's again, I've seen no video evidence of it. It's entirely speculative as far as I can tell. But either way, if it was a bird that caused the destruction or a drone, the end result is the loss of another military transport and the associated between 12 and 16 people. So that's the situation with that IL-76. By the way, if you're just chiming in, absolutely let me know you're here. I do appreciate you being here and want you to know how much I appreciate it overall to see you here and commenting. Go ahead and let me know that you're here. And if you have any questions, pipe in. By the way, thank you, Tony, for chiming in. And no problem with being a little bit late. I try and start off with a couple of the news items that are less important and then go to the more important ones as I go. So we just finished about the IL-76 that crashed over in Ivanovo. Let's go ahead and go on with the Ukraine part of this and talk about it for news out of Ukraine itself. According to the SBU, that's Ukraine's intelligence group, the largest FSB agent network in Ukraine, operating under the cover of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarch, was actually found and exposed, with many people being arrested. 4 key ones have been detained, and among those is one of the leaders of that church, Capital Temple, who was a member of the intelligence apparatus of the Russian Special Service. So many people have made a lot of hay about having the Ukrainian Orthodox Church be supposedly suppressed. Well, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is basically a part of the FSB. It's an intelligence network. So keep that in mind when you see those types of reports. At least 2 years are going to be required to demine Ukrainian-controlled territory in Kherson Oblast, west of the Dnipro River, according to the Kherson governor. That's a lot of time just to make that land useful and safe again. And that's going to be happening all across Ukraine, especially if they can get this war over anytime soon. Russians did strike the city of Kupiansk with a large guided bomb. I believe it's been reported it was a 1,500 kilogram monster. And with those guided bombs, the fact that they're striking residential complexes with them is even more troubling than anything else. The post office in Ukraine has unveiled a new stamp commemorating the Black Sea Fleet. As you can see, it is an underwater diorama of the potential sunken vessels. And this is more information on the upcoming offensives from Ukraine. And these are those sources. These are just what they're putting out, saying that they are doing special exercises, especially in regards to Crimea, where they can clearly understand everything that's going to take place. They're specifically looking at their rules of engagement effectively. They're talking about the targets that they're not allowed to actually strike, and the civilians are not the civilian targets that they're not allowed to strike, and the rules of engagement around that, which indicates to me at least a level of planning detail that's quite we'll just say mature in its in the level in which it's taking place. This could mean many of their plans are already near the implementation phase. But again, I have no interior look into that, just my initial thoughts on what I'm seeing of it. Let's go ahead and move over to Russia for a bit. And we've got quite a bit, especially with the refinery stuff that we'll get to in just a little bit. And I think it's related, the refinery stuff that is, to the Russian legions that have been assaulting into Belgorod and Kursk. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got going on in Russia itself first. Russian Telegram channels report a power plant on fire in St. Petersburg. Possible sabotage, possible drones, we're not sure. There's also a powerful explosion in the town of Velyuki in Belgorod region, after which a strong fire started. They're reporting that this might be a Su-27 aircraft going down. But again, we have no confirmation on that. I've just seen that there was a fire in that area several times now, and all of them have associated with a Su-27 going down. Russian lawmakers are putting together legislation declaring that the basically giving Crimea to Ukraine in 1954 was illegal. Seems like they like to do a lot of take backsies, for lack of a better way to say it. They've done the same thing about their sale of Alaska to the United States. They said the same thing about other territories in the Baltics and things like that. They're trying to undo 100 years of this type of action. The Ukrainians, however, did respond to this, to them invalidating the handoff of Crimea to Ukraine, stating that's a paltry attempt by the Russian dictatorship to legitimize its own gross violations of international law. Basically, a good summary by the Ukrainians on what the Russians are trying to do. They're creating problems. They're creating more problems, is what they're doing, to try and justify their actions. And that is a fundamental feature of Russian society, playing the victim of Western evil, that they were tricked and duped by Western evil because they're so kind and trusting and righteous, and yet they don't keep any of their own agreements. So why would we believe them on these ones? So moving on. There was a large drone attack on Taganrog on March 9th, demonstrating that the Ukrainian military can still reach strategic targets on Russian territory. This is the one for the A-50 complex here. This indicates that that even far behind the front lines, their Russian strategic aircraft are still at risk, and something they're going to have to watch out for. By the way, the wind is picking up. So if you're hearing a lot of wind noise, please let me know. I'll try and keep myself pointed with my back to the wind. Oops. Let's go ahead and get this one translated real fast here. Okay, this is another confirmation on the Su-27. Again, not confirmed, just more sources mentioning it. Vladimir Putin gave an interview, and he seems to be doing several of these lately after the Tucker Carlson one. And this one, he stated that Moscow is ready for nuclear war from a military technical point of view. That is no change from what it should have been or what it has been since the end of World War II. They have they basically have accused the U.S. of resuming nuclear weapons testing and threatened to consider more tests in Russia, considering that Russia has already been doing more tests. That's, again, just a silly accusation. They also say that they have deployed additional troops and weapon systems on the border with Finland. And one of the main reasons or main purposes of the increased rhetoric of nuclear confrontation is Putin's desire to keep the Russians in suspense, to convince them of the need for further initialization or militarization and continued war. So he's setting the stage. He's setting the stage for his domestic population for a wider war, and he's setting the stage to try and scare the West out of doing more. And he's been doing a right bang up job of that all along, keeping the West from actually going all in and providing the assistance that Ukraine needs to kick Russia out of the country. And that is the problem, is that as soon as he uses that threat, the threat is gone. Nuclear threats are most effective right before you drop the nuclear bomb. After that, you've dropped the nuclear bomb. Now nobody's going to trust you, and everybody's going to rise up in absolute fits to make sure you don't have any nuclear bombs to drop again. And that's the problem that he's facing, is what is that balancing point? Navalny sympathizing masked men have declared that they are going to attack polling stations on March 17th. This is a legal goal for their activities, they state. We still have a lot of gifts for the traitors of Russia. Elections without Navalny on the lists are not elections. Will this actually happen? Are these Navalny followers, or is this another FSB plant here? I don't know. But just keep that in mind. Nuclear threats again. And this is where we start getting into the stuff about refineries here. And we're starting with 40 drones attacking Voronezh Oblast overnight, aiming for various locations, including military airfields. Some of them did get intercepted, but overall, it was a big night for drone attacks from Ukraine into Russia. So let's go ahead and get into some of the big headliners here. And I've got a lot of stuff on this, so I'm going to try and burn through it pretty quick. 3 oil refineries in total have been struck, with fires breaking out on at one at Oriol. And let me see if I can get the rest of them here. In fact, we'll just go and step on through. The next one at Kustovo. And this one was in Rostov region. Novoshetkinsky Oil Products Plant. That's over in the Kursk region. An air raid was declared in Kursk as well. So, okay, Ryazan, Kustovo, and Kirishi were all attacked, and these are among the top 5 largest plants in Russia. This will not necessarily end Russia's ability to refine oil, because it's just not that large. There's plenty more to go. But these large plants being taken out of commission, even partially, does cause a lot of pain in the supply chain related to fuel. There's some footage. I don't know if I can play this one here. Some of the oil refinery fire. Sorry about that. Lots of this footage came out, and it's just pretty crazy what we're seeing here. The Russians are having to defend heavily, and what they're finding is that their air defenses are not sufficient to counter all the drones that are coming through. So in many ways, that means that it's open season on refineries and other targets that are vital to Russia's economic infrastructure. That might be happening right now. It's opportunities that might be wide open because they have had so much of their air defenses either taken out or having to spread it so thin. Interestingly enough, the part that was destroyed on the Lukoil oil refinery here in Nizhny Novgorod was actually the part that does about 53% of the processing work. It's called I think it's called an AVT6 installation, and I've got a graphic on that, I think, around here somewhere. Here we go. These towers are among these are the distillation towers. This is the main part of any refinery because it breaks things down into the different types of oil products. You can see where that it would be in any of these areas to do so and to create that separation and to crack that oil into various products. By hitting the tower, even if they can use part of it for their existing production, they lose all the lighter things like gasoline, kerosene for home heaters, and jet fuel. And even though that leaves them with like diesel fuel, motor oil, and fuel for other things, this is interesting to say the least. If they can even use part of this facility after it's been hit. Apparently, I'm at a wrong angle here. So overall, we've got a lot of videos and footage of these types of things. Some of the knock-on effects of this type of an attack is that the cost of farming will go up because the cost of fuel will go up, and therefore the cost of food will go up. This will also mean that gas lines are probably going to grow as some of this refining capacity has been lost. They won't be able to actually provide fuel to their own citizenry. They've already stopped exports for 6 months. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out in the end. And that's a situation with the refinery that they've hit over this basically over the last 24 hours. Let's go ahead and move on to the international front here. And again, just as a reminder, we're a little bit getting some of the raw stuff here today. So you might see some multiples of some things just because as I go through, it's going to happen. From Jeff Selden, Ukraine is not running out of courage and tenacity. They're running out of ammunition, and we're running out of time to help them. This is from the CIA's the threat assessment. So that's interesting to see, and overall, we've got, wow. And that's true. There is no shortage of courage in Ukraine. They've been doing amazing things with basically our junk and taking the fight to the Russians. And as long as they can get more of our junk, they can keep kicking Russians out. The European Parliament has voted to criminalize bypassing or circumventing EU sanctions. This will give a little bit of teeth to the sanctions regimes that they've got against Russia at this point. Of course, the U.S. has announced another military aid package of between $300 to $400 million. I've got several things in here on this. Just straight up, it's going to involve some ATACMS missiles, some ammunition, some artillery shells. We know that it's kind of a drop in the bucket, as Combat Vet React says. This is just a few hours of artillery shells, but it's still better than zero. And it sounds like from the stuff I've read later that it was basically the costs of certain things from the suppliers was lower than expected. And so therefore they were able to reallocate that funds to an aid package as well. I already mentioned the naval drills that Russia, China, and Iran are doing. Let's go ahead and keep on going here. The Vatican has now restated the Pope's comments multiple times now, and are now at the point where they are saying that no, Russia needs to take the first step to start negotiations. They need to lay down their arms first. So the Vatican has really rephrased this multiple times now. So keep that in mind. You see more on that in the previous video. From President Zelensky, there's been talk from the French army, or French from France, about possibly sending some of their troops over to Ukraine. And Zelensky put it straightforward. As long as Ukraine holds, the French army can stay in France. There's a new Danish military aid package worth 2.3 billion Danish kroner, or about $336 million. That's been approved. The funds will be over a 3-year period, 2024 through 2026. So I don't know exactly how much is in it, but at least it's another aid package. The Czech Republic has announced that they can put together another 200,000 shells if people want to help them buy them. Interesting how the Czech Republic is able to find these shells when other countries are not. And I wonder if it's just because the Czech president is not constrained by certain aspects of national pride or political will. I'm not sure on this. Just interesting to see him doing it, and more power to him to do so. The United States and France have become leaders in the global arms export race, while Russia has experienced a rapid decline. Russia has basically had to redeploy anything they would have exported back to their own domestic uses and for the war in Ukraine. So any arms deals they may have been left to follow in general. But even worse, a lot of those orders were canceled or dried up once the other nations have seen how Russian hardware is performing in Ukraine. So pretty nuts to see that happen, because for years Russia was basically top dog when it came to military arms exports. That's the aid package again from the U.S. The discharge petition has managed to get started. I believe it was 176 of the 216 required have already signed on. So that is taking place. Even if they get all the signatures today, though, it will mean that it will be 1 month for the discharge petition to take place. That does leave old Speaker Johnson in a really tough spot with the resignation of Republican Ken Buck. It'll make the Republicans' majority in the House literally one vote. And if Johnson can't prevent this discharge petition from being carried out, it will indicate that the Republican Party is literally powerless in the House. And therefore, it might be to their best interest if Johnson just brings the vote on an aid package straight to the floor. That $60 billion aid package is just sitting there waiting to be done. The Brits have actually put together a laser air defense system called Dragonfire, a long-range laser weapon. Now, some people have used the images from this, claiming there are space lasers. No, this is a ground-based laser air defense system, and it sounds like they may be sending the first version to Ukraine to try out in actual combat conditions. I've seen that phrased in different ways, so I'm not absolutely sure on that, but just interesting to see, and interesting to see this technology making it to Ukraine. Okay, and that's everything from the international front. We're going to go into the front lines. Let me tell you, this is where things start getting interesting. So let's go ahead and jump in here. This is I don't know if you can see it here. Let me see. There we go. Yeah, this is the description of the map changes. This is from last night when I checked it. Russian liberation forces have driven the enemy out of Koznica and Lozova-Rudka. Fighting continues in Novotavazanka, Nekativka, and Tyotkine. So these are all Russian towns here. Let's see if we can get the map to show this for you. Do a refresh real fast. By the way, this is the deep state map. So if you're looking for what I've got pulled up here, that's what it is. So let's go ahead and just pop over there and see what we've got going on. Apologies, apparently the map is not acting very fast today. Okay, there we go. Now, it's not a large territory. I mean, we're not talking huge amounts of territory, but we've seen these Russian legions. Now, these are 3 legions now. It was 2, but 3 legions that are all Russian citizens with Russian passports that are working with Ukraine, but their only unifying aspect is an opposition to Putin. That does not make them all, the white knights in this. However, they are still fighting against Vladimir Putin to try and, in their cases, save Russia. They see what the situation in Ukraine is, and they do see that this is a negative as far as Russia goes on the world stage. So we've got these forces actually going across the border into Russia itself. I don't know if I can get a good picture of some of the other areas here. Okay, here's another one over here, where these forces have gone into this area over here. Again, this is on the Russian side of the border. This is not on the Ukrainian side. And the fighting has been fierce over there. We've got more on that in just a moment. There was, in a unrelated, I guess sort of related news, over on the Dnipro River, there was a stranded boat, an oil tanker, as I understand it, that was being used by Russian forces as a command post for the area of the Dnipro River. Ukrainians have destroyed that boat now, so it's no longer being used for it. There were reports that some pretty big name Russian propagandists were maybe killed in it, but I believe those were debunked from later information. Just interesting to see. The Russians have not been stopping, though, just because they're getting Belgorod and Kursk invaded. They've got a small amount of area they've recaptured near Klishivka. So this is really just crazy things going on over here. This is near Bakhmut and Klishivka. Now let's see if we can get into the huge amount of information about this, about the Free Russia Legion and their announcement that they were going to the polls. LSR, RDK, and the new Siberian Battalion operate as independent units, according to the Ukrainian GUR. Now, it does look like the Ukrainians are outfitting them. They're providing them with weapons and equipment. In nearly all cases, it's all Russian manufacture or similar Russian manufacture. For instance, one of these units did lose a T-64BV, which is definitely not Western manufacture. It is a heavy tank that's common in Ukraine. So they're clearly supporting them, even though they're acting as independent units. One of the Siberian Battalion released a statement saying it will not be possible to overthrow the criminal dictatorial regime in the Russian Federation peacefully. It can only be eliminated with weapons in hand. This night we began to fulfill our promise. There are fierce battles on the territory of the Russian Federation. This is, of course, they mentioned the 3rd unit that was established by Ukraine for Russian nationals who want to fight against the Kremlin. And this morning, they reported that they had control over the Russian village of Tetkino. Now, this is a decent-sized village, so it's not just a little place. But even so, they came rolling in and drove out the Russians, who apparently fled, leaving behind heavy equipment. Let me see. I'm trying to kind of step through this pretty quick here because I want to get to the most important pieces. And I've got a lot of duplicate information here. Here's where it's reported that they took control of the border town of Lazova Rudka in the Belgorod region. So overall, again, we're seeing them hitting various places right on the border and successfully doing so. The Russians are, well, hold on. This might be from a drone, so don't think it's related to this. I'm going to move on. In the same vein, at the same time that these assaults are happening, by these Russian legions here. There's been a coordinated attack by Ukrainian drones on various facilities, including the FSB office in Belgorod, and I believe the government administration building in Belgorod as well. There have been some fatalities resulting from that, and some damage to those facilities overall. However, the Russians, of course, always have to put their spin on things. They did report that there were several attempts by Ukrainian forces, they specified Ukrainian forces, to break into the Kursk and Belgorod regions, but that, of course, they were all destroyed, and that the enemy lost, in this case, Ukrainians, lost 100 personnel, 6 tanks, a Caesar self propelled gun, 20 armored combat vehicles, and a strong point. If Russia would just give us real information, it would probably actually be better for them overall. But when they provide these huge numbers that are entirely implausible, it really just it shows that they are not honest with us about what's going on. This was when the Tetkino battle was still underway, although I'm sure there's still plenty of fighting in the area from everything I've seen. Here is a joint statement from the soldiers of the RDK and the Freedom of Russian Legion and the Siberian Battalion. Every day, dozens of ordinary, innocent people, mostly women and children, die from shelling from Belgorod. The shelling of Ukraine from the territory of Belgorod must stop. In this regard, we are forced to fire defeat of military positions located in the cities of Belgorod and Kursk. In order to avoid civilian casualties, we call on everyone to immediately leave the cities. So they're saying that's the reason for this incursion, is to stop the shelling of Ukrainian territory, killing women and children. More confirmation on some of the drone strikes here. BMP-1 was destroyed. A BMD-2 was destroyed as well by the Ukrainian forces. Kursk and Belgorod had air raid warnings, with drones shot down in Rostov and St. Petersburg. And as Jason J. Smart says, it sucks when the neighbors invade, doesn't it? Keep on moving here. Some of this is just repeating information already. Now, this thread right here is long, but basically I've already gone through the highlights of it already. So if you are over on Twitter and find Noel Reports, NOELREPORTS, you can find that thread super easy. It was, last I checked, it was right at the top. And finally, we'll end off with this little bit from Dmitry at War Translated. The reports that the Russians are putting out definitely focus on these being Ukrainian troops, and yet they are Russian men, Russian passport holders. These are Russian citizens that are fighting in the Russian soil. Yes, they're supported by Ukraine, but they are independent units in other regards. So take your pick on how you want to feel about it. Overall, though, the calling them Ukrainian forces is a bit of a stretch. Not a lot, but just a little bit. And that's kind of the whole situation overall. I've got a little bit of extras here that I'm going to quickly go through. No big ones here, but I do appreciate, again, that you being here. I don't see a lot of comments today, and that's okay. Like I said, these ones that I'm doing in the meantime are pretty a little bit rougher than normal, but understand that I do believe that this is all important news, and I want you to be informed as possible, so that if you come across somebody who is saying, "Oh no, that didn't happen," or "This happened instead," you at least have some idea of what's going on. Now let's move on to the interesting extras here. Here is a Russian soldier who confused Ukrainians for his own unit and was eventually called on to surrender. He did leave. He was recalcitrant about it. He didn't really want to, but he was taken prisoner and successfully escorted from the combat zone. Interesting to see on that regard. Now, this is posted into the extra section because there is no date attached to this video footage. So I don't know when it happened. However, this is the Russian Ministry of Defense publishing video footage of 3 Ukrainian helicopters being destroyed. They're targeted by cluster munitions and then guided missiles. I absolutely have no reason to believe this is anything but an accurate representation. And the problem is that with no date on it, this could have happened months ago and I wouldn't be able to tell. Those ManPads missiles, by the way, this case the FIM-92 Stingers, have been surprisingly flexible. In this case, this man, call sign Mavic, has shot down. I believe, see, he shot down his first cruise missile with one of these Stinger missiles. So interesting to see, and just great to see that they're still being effective on the battlefield. And this is just some pictures of the demining specialists that are working on clearing the territory of Ukraine of mines and making it productive again. That's what I'm going to end off with today. So thank you again for joining me today. I'm going to go ahead and sign off at this point. I do appreciate you guys being here once again. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.